So here's why the banks won't lend mortgages to people who are self-employed. Quite frankly, they are seen as their biggest risk. And where most people would only need a couple of pay slips to prove that they are able to repay their mortgage, I myself had to prove 4 to 5 years of tax returns to the banks. Now, I'd only been self-employed for about 5 years at that time. And so years 1, 2, and 3 were legitimately not that great. But for the banks, that did not bother them. They were not interested in lending to me. The frustrating part is that when my girlfriend got qualified from university, she didn't even need a single pay slip. She only needed a letter from her employer that said, yes, you will start in October. That was 5 months from that point. Now, back in the 1990s, in the UK, we did used to have self-employed mortgages. I remember my mortgage advisor telling me about them. They were not very well regulated, and yet they played a huge part in the actual downfall or the mortgage crisis of the 90s. People were basically saying that they earned a lot more than they did. The banks were happy to lend them the money on that basis. And of course, they struggled to repay houses that were 3, 4, 5 times multiple over what they could afford. 30 years later, that resistance, that trepidation from the banks to lend to self-employed people has carried on. And I think it's actually been really detrimental as more and more people start to move freelance and more people start to become a little bit more entrepreneurial, set up their own businesses. We're certainly seeing the trend. It's proving more and more difficult for them to gain the finance that they need, not only in their own personal lending, but especially as well their business too.